Well, I'm John Vechey. I'm one of the founders of PopCap Games. Currently, I'm working in the corporate development world, so we raised about $23 million, and so I'm trying to figure out how to spend that. So I have the coolest job in the world where I get to have a company that I started, and I get to spend a bunch of money. But recently, I just got done working in the social group on Facebook games. Yeah, PopCap's a 10-year-old company. Our first product was Bejeweled. We're a casual game company in that we make games that appeal broadly to everyone. And so, and our focus really has always been on just making great games. And so basically PopCap has grown and existed on the concept of make great games and then bring them everywhere we can. So, every platform that we can get them on, every market, every region, we're really just focused on getting those games out there to the customers. Every game's a little bit different. Plants vs. Zombies was actually just about 3 people for a little over 3 years. So Plants vs. Zombies was certainly a small team, and we could have put more artists on it, but it had a very specific art style, and the game designer, George Fan, really wanted to use the same artist, and so there wasn't any discrepancy in the art, and so he ended up, it ended up taking a while because there's just a lot of art needs, and so that game was like that. Bejeweled Twist had about 4 or 5 people on it, kind of the towards the end of the cycle. Every game's a little bit different. It's something that we probably could use to have bigger teams and like slightly shorter development schedules, but we do feel like having that small team that's very manageable is kind of the right choice at the end of the day to make the best game, because everyone's accountable for everything else. You don't have someone who's programming and just programming and think my job is to code. Everyone's thinking about the game design. Everyone's thinking about how their decisions impact the other team. And the bigger team you get, I think the harder that would be for us. I think it was Tower. I think the original idea from George, and again, I wasn't the game designer on this, but I will pretend like I know what I'm talking about, which was the original idea from George was actually he wanted to do a tower defense game, and he was really a big fan of Magic the Gathering. And so his original goal was to kind of combine some of the fun of Magic the Gathering with a simplified tower defense. And so the first couple of versions of Plants vs. And then from there he said, oh, well, what are some natural enemies that are kind of funny, right? Because George really wants funny. And so he's like, And so I think he went through a bunch of different iterations of in his mind about potential kind of, things that are going to be enemies. And I think he just at one point he's like, man, plants are things that don't move, so the tower part makes sense. And zombies are kind of a naturally funny enemy for plants. And so that's kind of where it came from. And then he actually ended up losing a lot of the magic kind of elements that he had originally planned and that he had originally put in the game because he felt like it just complicated it too much. So he went with a much simpler, you've got the idea of picking your plants that you're going to take into battle, but you don't actually have the full-on, like, making a full deck. Because, he actually was pretty intense for a while. He's like, you made a deck, and every time you put a card in it would change the probability of getting it, and it was more random. And then he realized that an economy-based gameplay system was more fun and easier to understand. Oh no, never, because never, not a PopCap, no. Not really, no, as long as it's focused on sort of the mass market. And I don't think we would do a really violent game. So, we certainly have got sort of a family-friendly attitude. But as far as like how zany or how crazy, George's next game is, if Plants vs. Zombies is here in the crazy scale, the next game's up here. So it's definitely combining things that make even less sense together in funnier ways. Unfortunately, I can't give them. I can't give any details. We registered a trademark at some point that may or may not be the game. I think so, again, may or may not be the game, but there was definitely a trademark registered that it got picked up a little bit. Some people noticed, which I think that's the height of PopCap, when people are paying attention to what trademarks you register. I have to wait and wonder, and I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will not be. I'm sure it'll not be quick game development. That's not his style, but it'll be fun. We definitely put all of our top franchises on every platform. So I can definitely imagine that we're working on a Plants vs. Zombies on the Xbox, and I can imagine that's also really awesome. Without saying anything about it, unfortunately. I wish I could. I think I'd get in trouble. Uh-oh, I better say something. It's gonna have some. This is vague enough, I think. It is going to have probably more new features than any other Xbox game we've had. So it's definitely really going into really taking advantage of some of the things that Xbox has, and a lot of new gameplay features that they spent a lot of time on. So it's pretty exciting. I think it's gonna be really exciting. There's some technical difficulties, but for us, the challenge is always gameplay and sort of fun and keeping the core of the game. Plants vs. Zombies, some of the challenge that they spent on any console version is you've got the controller, and so you've got to figure out how do you go from a game that's really meant for the mouse. It feels good to move the mouse and click on the coins, click on the sun. You can't do that on a controller. The iPhone has a really small screen, and it's touch screen, and so how do you make it so that your thumb's not blocking the game, and then how do you make sure that you can keep the whole game on the iPhone at once? So there's definitely a lot of challenges that the multi-platform development brings. We're pretty good at dealing with them, and we spend a lot of time and really take them high. We kind of say we don't port games, we adapt games, because every platform is just different enough. I think we've got the concrete plan to definitely support it. I think we're still figuring out the exact plan of how do we support it. I think it's going to be extremely successful. So there's some people at the company are just like, yeah, who's going to buy that? It's just a big iPhone, I mean, that's kind of how the world is right now. It's like people are skeptical or positive, and I'm certainly positive because I think it's going to fill a need of sort of that couch side computer that people don't realize they have. And so I think once people start getting that and they realize, oh, it's nice to have this little simple computer that I can surf the internet on next to my couch. And so I think what's going to be really exciting is that's going to be a great gaming platform. Like, I'm not a huge RTS guy. It's just not my favorite genre, but I kind of want to play an RTS on the iPad because it can be so visceral, like you're actually moving your things, and so I think it's going to unlock some genres of games that the iPhone can't because it's a little bit too small, so it's a little less immersive. So I'm pretty excited about the iPad. I think it's going to be a really cool gaming platform. For me, I mean, I think it's casual games are just a little bit more approachable, right? Like, I played Dragon Age, and first time I played Dragon Age, I played for 6 hours, and it was awesome. And then I got busy, and so I didn't play it for a couple weeks. So then one day I'm like, oh, I'm gonna play some Dragon Age for an hour. I loaded it up. I sat there and I'm like, oh crap, I've forgotten the controllers and I've forgotten where I am in the game. Right? So basically, in order to get back to where I was, it's in terms of just, getting the controllers down again, understanding where I was in the game, I was going to have to play for at least a couple more hours to really get that momentum, to get fun out of that experience. And so I think just as people get busier, casual games are something that, if they're good games, because that's the most important thing, right? Because the hardcore gamer, I think, is going to know, this game's just not good. I'm not going to waste my time on this, even if it's a 5-minute experience. But I think there's a searching out, a desire for games that you can just jump in, play, have fun for moment one, maybe play for 15 minutes, maybe play for 3 hours, but it doesn't have that same commitment that a game like Dragon Age would. Not to rip on Dragon Age, which is a really cool game, but... I think Facebook's great. I mean, it's certainly a social gaming is a growing part of our business, and this year we've got some cool plans, certainly around Bejeweled Blitz, which is our current released Facebook game, as well as new Facebook games or social games, because I think we might start branching out to other social networks. I mean, for me, there's two things. There's social games, and there's sort of social features. And social games are the idea of just making a game that's primarily a social experience, where if you take the social out of it, it's going to be barely a game, right? And so we're definitely working on ones like that. But I really feel that social networks are going to change the games industry, I think, all around, which is every game that I can think of, unless it's like some weird embarrassing porno game, would be more fun if there were social elements to it, right? Like in Peggle, for example, if I was playing and I just knew how much that, you were playing Peggle and what Peggle Master you're playing, or what your score was on levels, little things here and there. I knew I could, I'd make fun of you because you like Jimmy Lightning. Like that would make the game experience better. It doesn't have to be, super integrated, but I think that in the future, certainly all of PopCap games are going to be somewhat social and have social elements to them. And I think that's going to be really exciting because I think it's just going to make games more fun in general. Yeah, right now we're still heavily investing in social. We have a Shanghai division in China, which is focused on growing in that region. We're really focused on Europe and getting better in terms of understanding each region's differences, localizing our games. We've been doing that for a while, but really kind of regional expansion. It's like, for us, where are people playing games or would play games that we're not, and that's how we're looking. And so for us, it's both platforms and regions. And so for us, social is a great platform because there's so many millions of people who are now, I think, first getting into games because they're on Facebook and they see, my friend who I play bridge with is playing Farmville. That's I guess I'll check that out. And they would never have checked out a game if they wouldn't have seen that. And so I think social networks are great because they're introducing a lot of new customers into gaming in general, which for us is key because we like the hardcore gamer because we feel like they're great, right? They spend a lot of money. They talk about our games, and when we have a great game, I think that they appreciate it for what it is as far as a great game. And then the mass market gamer is the bulk of our audience. And for us, the challenge is always how do we convince them if they don't know they like playing games to play a game? Because it's hard to get someone, if I said, hey, here's this box and you're going to love what's in the box, but you don't know what's in the box and you're scared about opening it, it's going to be hard to convince you that you're going to love it and you're going to pay money for it. And so I think social games help make that easier. Oh, I wish we had some kind of magic spell or anything. I mean, I think part of it comes from we pay a lot of attention to detail, and we ask ourselves at every moment, is this making the game more fun? That's the language we have. It's funny. You can actually go to a gaming conference and count how many times you hear the word fun, and sometimes you'll be like, wow, I don't think I heard the word fun all day. And we're constantly saying, well, this feature we just added, is this fun or is it just confusing? Is it adding actual depth or just complexity? So I think from that standpoint, that's kind of how our games get fun. And I think how they get cool is they're just our own, right? When, they were trying to figure out the art style for Peggle, there was, this vision of just like, Peggle needs to be its own universe, right? It's got to feel like this thing. And almost reminiscent of the old school fighting games, and just have this, it's not just powers, but these are characters, right? And it has, so I think they get cool not because they're trying to be cool, but because they're really trying to be their own thing, right? Like, yeah, it's got a unicorn and rainbow, and at first glance you're like, what the heck is this? It's like some of the old Bambi, the Disney cartoon. You watch that and you're like, wow, I can't believe I just saw some weird drug chip in this kid movie, but it was its own, and I think that's what made it successful and popular and cool now. I think that's probably the success we have is, George, when he's making Plants vs. Zombies, isn't thinking, oh, how do I make this cool? He's just thinking, oh, this is funny for me. This is the game that I think I need to make. So. You know what? I'm gonna bring it up to the studio, and I think maybe we can make it happen. It's interesting because I always fear that Bjorn's a little bit more, because he's kind of the most generic, right? He's the generic power, and he's kind of he's kind of the generic the personality. He's he's not like, oh, I'm in your face, like some of the other characters. He's just got his own thing going, and he's just kind of the calm, steady character. And so it's interesting when people are like, I love Bjorn. I'm always happy. So. We were a bit worried about causing some kind of a universe collapse. It was a lot like the particle accelerator. Actually, we had some people lobbying against the idea of putting Peggle into World of Warcraft because of the space-time ramifications. It was kind of scary, but sometimes you've got to be bold and innovate and really take those kind of challenges and just do them and say we're going to be okay. The world's not going to stop, and thankfully it hasn't. But we're still a little on edge about it. I did just find out that we've sold over 50 million units of Bejeweled, which is amazing. I remember thinking, man, 1 million units would be amazing, and it's like 50 million. And then a new copy of Bejeweled gets sold every 4.3 seconds. But I've been always scared to do the calculation of how much lost productivity the world's had because of our games. It's not really a statistic I want to know because I'll probably feel really guilty. Hopefully, I mean it's. I know I like playing our games, and I know a lot of people like playing games. So that makes me pretty proud that I was part of a company that makes games that people love. So it's pretty cool. I think it's Peggle. I think I've played a lot of Peggle, but I'm a little partial to it because in the early days when they were working on Peggle, I was coming up with a lot of ideas, very few of which actually made it in the game, but I was definitely coming up with lots of ideas. And then Plants vs. Zombies, I played that all the way through, obviously. And then Bejeweled Blitz, I've never been a big Bejeweled. I mean, I've always liked Bejeweled, but I've never been like, I'm addicted to Bejeweled. And so Bejeweled Blitz on Facebook, that 1 minute game, I've probably spent 300 hours on, 400 hours on. It's disturbing how many nights I've been up till 4 a.m. playing Bejeweled Blitz. I think it's simple. It's really approachable. It's fun, and I think it's we talk about this a lot. Like what makes Bejeweled successful, and my theory, and this is a little bit off the wall, a little bit hippie, but it's almost like a Buddhist meditation, right? Like, you know, when you're playing Bejeweled, you just kind of get in this different zone that I think in our society is kind of good, right? Because you're not actively thinking. But you're not thinking, right? It's like you're kind of clearing your head in a way that you don't have to have other thoughts. You don't have a lot going on. So if you're having a busy day, it's like a way to get out of it. And you can just kind of recharge a little bit, which I know, again, sounds a little bit hippie, but that's one of my theories, is that it's a lot like, you know, the Zen monks, you know, raking rocks for 3 years to get enlightenment or something. I don't think anyone's gotten enlightened from Bejeweled, but I do think there's something to the fact that it just clears your head. We just price our games whatever the platform in the game dictates. So we've had games for $30. We've had games for $20. You know, iPhone games are cheaper. So really, it's just about whatever the game is. I'm sure if we released a you know, World of Bejeweled type game, you know, that might be more expensive. Which you know, so but it's us. They're just looking and saying, okay, what's the platform? What's the right price? I know we think in the PC downloadable space, we don't like the price. There's like rampant price discounting on some of the game portals, and we're a little bit like, you don't really need to do that. That's not the only way you can compete or get customers. So we actually prefer slightly higher prices, but not too high, because we want our games to be loved and played by as many people as we can. So there's kind of that right moment where we get a lot of people playing the game at the right price point. Yeah, right now I'm playing League of Legends, which is this Defense of the Ancients, was this Warcraft 3 mod that got very successful. It's sort of like what Counter-Strike was to Half-Life, Defense of the Ancients is to Warcraft 3. And so I've been playing that, even though it's got some of the worst actual UI of any game I've ever played. And it's just very convoluted, and it took me a long time. Like, in the game itself, it's okay, but all things outside of the game. So I've been playing that. That's quite fun, because it's got some of the fun of an MMO, but I only have to play an hour at a time, or an hour and a half, or maybe 30 minutes. So I like that, and I can play lots of different characters. I'm one of those guys in MMOs who will start a character, get it to a certain level, and then be like, I want to try that other character. And so it's kind of the perfect game. And then I'm playing this web game called Neptune's Pride, which is instead of this multiplayer Masters Orion type game, which by this ex-irrational guy. And so I'm kind of playing that, which is pretty good. It's a little bit generic in some ways, but it's also really nicely done and pretty fun. So those are 2 games I'm playing right now. Oh, definitely. I mean, I think we get a lot of inspiration, both positive and negative, from other games. And sometimes I think it's when I play games that I feel like are flawed. A lot of times it's because I just think, well, they could have finished. You know, they should have finished it. They should have polished it a little bit more. But for example, like the biggest inspiration for Peggle was Burnout Revenge.
The racing game?
Yeah, the racing game. That was the biggest inspiration for Peggle. Well, because it's always positive, right? Like, so many racing games are very punishing, but the Burnout franchise, it was, you know, you're doing the takedowns and you're just like racing, and you know, you can even play it. I don't know how much you played it, but you know, it's like, you know, you'll be going on, it looks like you're about to crash, and kind of just jumps the car a little bit to the left so you don't crash, right? It's so forgiving, and you know, you take someone down, it makes it cinematic. It's like takedown in slow motion. And so a lot of Peggle's inspiration about how rewarding it is really came from the fact that we were playing just a lot of Burnout, a lot of Burnout. A Dragon Age would be a perfect one. Again, I don't mean to be ripping on Dragon Age, but that control scheme is so convoluted. I'm sorry, but that interface does not need to be that complicated. Does not need to be that hard. Like, what makes Dragon Age fun isn't the fact that I have these 50 billion things I can do. And, you know, I mean, I think that's where Blizzard is nearly flawless. Not without flaws, but, you know, you look at, you know, Diablo and you're like, wow, it just feels good to click. And they just kept it simple. They kept every possible thing simple. And so when I play games like Dragon Age, I'm like, gosh, could you not have simplified this? Does this really make the game more fun? It doesn't for me. And so that's kind of one of the things that I see a lot of times, is just overcomplicated either interfaces or input mechanisms, or just too many features. You know, BioShock is another game where I was playing it, man, this is like nearly, you know, at the beginning it was just almost flawless, right? But then the more you go on, the more they started adding these things, and it became this thing where I'm like, wow, I can't keep track of what's going on now. I've got to level up these things and invest in these other things. I don't know what they all do, and it can be more frustrating than fun. So a lot of times I think it's adding too much complexity and not just focusing on very simple depth based on gameplay. So Peggle was very inspired by pachinko, which is the Japanese gambling game, and we were actually playing a lot of pachinko games, emulator games, and the best one was this game, Sexy Reaction Pachinko, which pretty much was the game like it sounds, with anime and tentacles. But we also found it at some point it's not just fun, it's just not interactive enough. And so the first Peggles that we created were a little bit more like Rube Goldberg machines. Like, okay, you shoot some balls over here, it unlocks this switch, but then you've got 10 seconds to hit this thing over here. And that was certainly one of the directions that Peggle had taken for a while. But we always found it was fun, but it was never, it always lacked a certain depth, a certain simpleness. And so that ended up getting scrapped. And I always thought that Peggle would have a moving thing back and forth instead of having the static target shooter thing. It turned out it was just too much to think about. I think those ideas are more dead. I know that Peggle 2 is definitely getting a lot of things that they wanted to do and kind of advance on a lot of things if they're working on Peggle 2, which I don't know if they are. But of course I have to be coy. I'll get in trouble from the PR people.
She's not listening.
Okay. Well, Peggle 2 is going to be awesome in 3 to 5 years.